Hello, church family. Today we're going to be looking at Hebrews 9:11 through 14, and it's going to continue the argument that he's been making all along, and that is that Jesus is better than those things in the Old Covenant. And he's been talking, especially since places at the end of chapter 5 and 6, and especially in our conversation since chapter 7, about how Jesus is a better priest than the lines of Aaron, and how the covenant that he mediates is better. And that's been the point of conversation in Hebrews 9 up to this point as well. And here in 9:11, it's going to say, but, so a little bit of a contrast there. When Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, so this is his identity. He is our high priest of the good things that have come. And what are those good things? The new covenant. Then through the greater and more perfect tent, so he's making a contrast here, that he's made earlier in the chapter, where he was talking about the tabernacle, that those things stood as a shadow of the reality of things. So he came through the greater and more perfect tent. That tent was not made with human hands like the tabernacle was. That is, it's not of this creation. So the tabernacle was of this creation. The places where Jesus entered were not of this creation. He entered once for all. So when he entered into those heavenly places, he entered one time for all in the holy places, not by means of blood of goats and calves. That's how the high priests had to enter. And he's talked about the futility of that, how they were many in number, how they had to go in every year before they went in. They had to bring the blood of a bull on the Day of Atonement, Leviticus chapter 16. But he doesn't enter by means of the blood of goats or of calves. Again, another contrast here. But by means of his own blood. So Jesus goes in by means of his own blood. Thus, again, his covenant is better, his priesthood is better, his mediation is better, thus securing an eternal redemption. The old covenant sacrifices could not secure an eternal redemption. And then he's going to, again, make a contrast and talk about how good the things were in the Old Testament, for if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of a defiled person, somebody who's unclean, with the ashes of a heifer, sanctify for the purification of the flesh. So here in verse 13, at the first part of it, he's talking about, or in verse 13, he's talking about what do the old covenant sacrifices do? The blood of goats and bulls, they sprinkle on that unclean person. What do? They sanctify, they make holy the flesh. He's already started to talk about this external versus internal reality earlier in the chapter. So here, he's going to continue that external, internal. What did the old covenant sacrifices do? They could externally make someone clean. He's used the word conscience earlier in the chapter, and he's going to use it here in verse 14. If the old covenant sacrifices could sanctify for the purification of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience? So he doesn't just purify us externally. So notice the difference here. The defiled persons are for the purification of the flesh. What does the new covenant sacrifice of Jesus do? It cleanses us from the inside out, purifies our conscience from dead works to serve the living God. And that word serve is a priestly word. So here it's even trying to hint at the fact that we become priests so that we can serve God in this new covenant reality. So the blood of Christ, what does it do? It cleanses us internally. And we know how does the blood of Christ do this? What is the reality of this? Well, what he does, he's already quoted the passage in Jeremiah 31 when we were back in Hebrews 8. He quotes Jeremiah 31 through 34, where he talks about in those days and at that time he's going to make a new covenant. What is that covenant going to be marked by? He's going to place his Spirit within his people. So what Christ's atoning work on the cross does is he changes our hearts. He gives us his Spirit. He cleanses us from the inside. We're not merely made clean externally, but he gives us a new nature by changing our hearts. This is the reality of the new covenant. Jesus talks about it. The old has gone, the new has come. Paul talks about it. Put off the old self and put on the new self. And that is what Christ allows us to do through his once for all eternal sacrifice, which changes our hearts. I hope that that's encouraging to you today.